We're now going to revert back to the itinerary, and we're going to start our first discussion of the day, which is challenges, opportunities and governance. But before we do, we would like to get you involved. So there is a poll that we are running to gather your experiences, your opinions, ask you just a couple of questions. There is a QR code here on the screen you can see, and we have some questions for you. If you scan this code, this will, inshallah, take you through to a couple of questions. And I might be able to actually give you just a moment to do that. This is hopefully going to get our brains going, that coffee that you've hopefully had already. You can get another one later, don't worry. Help it all kick in there and get us in the mood for discussing things. So here we can see those of you who are already in there, and this is live updating with the results. In your opinion, does the Muslim charity and voluntary sector face more challenges than the mainstream charity and voluntary sector? And 94% of you are saying yes. And the 7% are just, it's changing all the time, not sure or other. Are you concerned about the quality of governance in the Muslim charity and voluntary sector? So the governance of our charities, the way that we operate, and that's quite a big proportion of you there saying yes again. Okay, just a couple of questions to get you involved, but we're now going to move on to our first discussion panel of the day, and this panel is going to be chaired by Sister Saffa Mir, who's from the board of MCF. A very quick introduction for her. For those of you who don't know her, she is a charities, education and social enterprise solicitor with a keen interest in the charity sector and a founding trustee of a charity that she set up called Ayaan for Children Foundation, which aims to provide education and support for refugee children. And she has been an independent member of the Board of Trustees of MCF since April 2021, and we are delighted to have her. So, Saffa, over to you.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Louise, for that introduction. As she said, I'm a charity lawyer and a trustee of MCF. I'm going to start off by saying, forgive me if I start yawning midway. I'm currently actually on maternity leave and still not really used to those sleepless nights. So this is kind of the first event I've been doing since having my baby. So do forgive me for any kind of mistakes I make. As she said, I'll be chairing today's panel session, which is called Challenges, Opportunities and Governance. I'm going to introduce the speakers one by one, then they'll take it in turns to speak, and we'll end with hopefully a lovely Q&A. So the first speaker that we'll have today, to my right side, is Brother Jahangir Mohammed. He is the CEO of Communica Consulting, which has provided charity advice, representation and management services to hundreds of charities over the last decade. He is also the founding director of Ayaan Institute, which is a UK-based think tank which was established in 2021, focusing on the development and shaping of a Muslim world that is independent, united, prosperous and free from wars and conflicts. Today, Brother Jahangir will be talking about the nuances of charity issues and the importance of good charity governance. We will then hear from Dr. Teresa Dumasay, who is the Director of Research and Policy at the peace-building NGO Conciliation Resources. Dr. Teresa also coordinates NGO dialogue with banks and the UK government on reducing the negative impact of sanctions and counter-terrorism financing regulations on humanitarian and peace-building action. Today, Dr. Teresa will be talking about de-risking, debanking and financial access. We will then hear from Brother Tufail Hussain. He has 17 years of experience in the humanitarian and development sector. Tufail was appointed the Director of Islamic Relief UK in 2019, and in 2021 provided valuable leadership as interim CEO of Islamic Relief Worldwide. Under his leadership, Islamic Relief UK has significantly increased its income and developed successful partnerships with communities across the country. Tufail is also a trustee of the MuslimCharitiesForum and a director of TIC International, which is Islamic Relief Worldwide's clothes recycling and trading arm. Today we'll be hearing from him, and he'll be talking about the importance of organizational culture within charities. And finally, we will hear from Brother Moazzam Malik CMG, He is actually the chair of the Muslim Charities Forum's Trustee Board. He has a background in international affairs and government. He previously served as Director General Africa in the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office from September 2020 to May 2022. Prior to that, he was a British ambassador to Indonesia. He is currently Managing Director for Global Delivery at World Resources Institute. He champions World Resources Institute's mission in Asia and the Middle East and oversees the institutional infrastructure and systems required to deliver that ambitious global strategy and country strategies. Brother Moazzam today will be talking about the importance of leaving a long-lasting impact. So just to begin, we'll start with Brother Jahangir Mohammed.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum, colleagues, good morning. I'm going to briefly talk about some of the challenges as somebody who's worked with hundreds of charities over the last 12 years. But before I do, I want to say a big thank you to the Muslim Charities Forum for arranging this first ever event. It's much needed, and well done to Fadi and his team. There are different types of charities, so we shouldn't really lump them all together, but some of them face common challenges. There are mosques, there are international charities, and there are UK-based charities. There are some overlapping issues, and some areas I'm going to talk about the areas where we can do better or where there are obstacles. Number one, regulatory burdens. The charity sector often struggles with the burden of regulation from the Charity Commission, from counter-terrorism, from the banks these days, from safeguarding and many other areas. And that is very difficult. They also struggle with policies, getting the right balance. So they'll take policies from elsewhere, but then the implementation is not there, or there is too much in the policies, so getting that balance right. Also risk management. I come from a culture of risk management in local government, so it's easy for me, but doing risk management across different areas of the charity is very, very difficult, and it takes time to embed in the organization. And there's an increasing shift in attitudes from regulators. The charity sector was supposed to be a voluntary sector, is still mainly volunteers, but you're expected to be professionals. So it's very difficult to make that transition. The second issue is a big issue. Over the last 3 years, almost every client that I've had has struggled with banking issues, bank de-risking. So that's either closure of banks, or threatened closure, getting another bank account, in the case of new charities, registering and opening a bank account, and also restrictions overseas. And whilst this is a society-wide issue, there's a disproportionate effect on the Muslim charities because they operate in those areas of high risk, conflict zones, often countries torn apart, banking might not be there, and it just doesn't affect charities, it affects individuals, it also affects mosques. So whilst I'm here, and our MP is here, look, what I want to say, Nigel Farage has raised this issue, but society is moving towards a cashless society. We have to call for a guaranteed right to a bank account. Banking is a human right now. If you don't have a bank account, you can't exist. So I hope the media and our MPs will take up that issue. Secondly, banks must give reasons for why they are closing accounts and allow people to challenge the basis of the risk. Mosque charities are specific issues in relation to mosques. I deal with 1 or 2 clients every month. At the moment, I've got 7 mosque issues, all disputes. We have to stop this culture of strife and fighting and mosque disputes we have to find of resolving these issues. The political environment affects Muslim charities perhaps more than others for the same reason. We work in war-torn zones. We're all from overseas, where countries have all kinds of issues. Counter-terrorism, war on terrorism, prescription of organizations. This all affects Muslim charities, and they sometimes struggle to deal with those challenges and get the right advice. Conflict of interest. This is probably the most conflicts of interest and loyalty. We don't do this as well as we should, and sometimes we don't take it seriously, if I'm being honest. So we must do better on conflicts of interest. The quality of decision-making is often not as robust as it should be. We have this notion that we have an Amir and he takes all the decisions, and we don't challenge and critically review and produce minutes showing the right level of decision-making. In fact, I was at a Charity Commission meeting, and the charity, things had turned sour. The Amir had been making most of the decisions over years, and he turned against the trustees. And they told the Charity Commission, but he's our Amir, he makes the decisions. And the Charity Commission said, there's no such thing as Amir in charity law, there's collective decision-making. So I think we need to do that. We need to also remind ourselves that Muslim charities are based on Islamic ethos. They emerged because of our commitment to our Islamic values and Islamic donations. All too often, the modern sort of pressures and the competition between charities and the desire to outdo each other can lead to a loss of sight. And we shouldn't do that. We should go back to those issues. Obviously, the opportunities are immense. The Muslim charity sector, the think tank that I work for, we produced a report, the Aiding the Ummah, International Muslim Charities. There are 1,026 international charities we found. They do £708 million of work, fundraising, and the total charity sector we estimate is over £1 billion. Thousands of people are volunteers and workers in this sector. So this is an amazing opportunity. But, you know, we have to think about impact. If refugee camps exist and we keep feeding them over decades and decades, are we making the right impact? If there are women out there in refugee camps, are we providing the right projects for those people? So, you know, this is a real challenge. We're not very good at doing our promotion. We do a lot of great work, as Fadi has said, but we don't tell the world about it. And maybe we should. So, in 7 minutes, that's all really I have to say. But what I will do is, the title was initially Dramas of Charity Regulation. I can tell you lots of dramas, but perhaps I'll share one moment of laughter which sums things up. I was training some elderly imams of a charity, and they were complaining about the burdens of the Charity Commission and paperwork. You know, we are Muslims, we're responsible to Allah, accountable to Allah. So I said to them, yes, we're all accountable to Allah. That's in the next world. But whilst you're in this world, you registered as a charity and you're accountable to the Charity Commission first.
Thank you, Jahangir. We're going to pass on to Dr. Teresa now.
Thank you very much. It's an honour to be with you today. So I've been asked to talk about de-risking financial inclusion or exclusion. Just to clarify, de-risking is when financial institutions terminate or restrict their business relationships in order to avoid rather than manage risk. And a lot of you, and as Jahangir has already explained, feel the effects of that through delays or bank accounts closed. It's a long-standing problem, so my first point would really be that it's on a rather downbeat one. There's no quick fix to this one. It's been around a long time. There have been a lot of reports about the nature of the problem. It's also a very complex one because it relates to national, international regulatory environment. It also relates, of course, to commercial risk appetite in the banking and financial institutions. So in 2018, Charity Finance Group conducted a survey to understand the nature of the problem. Then a couple of the statistics that emerged from that, 80% of charities that responded said that they had experienced delays with international transfers through their own bank. 75% had experienced account closures. And we've just rerun that survey with some of those same questions with MCF Bond and Charity Finance Group, and found similar responses that are lower but similar in scale, 73% and 60% for those two phenomenon, as it were, those two experiences. Is there a reduction? Has there been a reduction in de-risking? I think it's hard to say, partly because the number of people responded to that survey, which isn't closed yet, so please do respond if you want. It was much lower, half the number of. And I wonder whether there's a degree of weariness, really, probably with surveys, probably with a wariness about the utility of raising this problem, because it's been around such a long time, and people are not feeling that the situation is getting better. But my second point was on a bit more hopeful point, that there has been quite a lot of progress made, particularly around these international transfers and humanitarian exceptions over the last few years, and this should provide more reassurance to banks about how the nature of the risk and the risks that they're exposed to by making these transfers. And I think this is also testament to the power of the collective, which is also the kind of theme of your conference. The first piece of work that I'd mention would be the Tri-Sector Group, which was a coming together of umbrella of NGOs after restating the problem for a number of years, and it was set up in 2017, and it's a dialogue with government departments, with Charity Commission, and with a number of banks on how to navigate the counter-terrorism and sanctions regulations in order to ensure and not impede humanitarian action. And that has resulted in a number of things, including general licenses that came out for Ukraine, for Syria after the earthquake, Afghanistan, and I'm pretty sure it will be considered for Gaza as well. So those are important steps. There was also guidance that came out from the Crown Prosecution Service in relation to this sector. Another key thing at an international level last year, which some of you would have known about, which was the UN Security Council Resolution 2664, which introduced a humanitarian exemption across all UN sanctions regimes, and these have to be then implemented into national law. So, and the US went further actually and introduced those exemptions into its autonomous sanctions. And the other piece of really impressive collective action has been in relation to the Financial Action Task Force, which is an intergovernmental body set up post 9/11 to monitor terrorism financing risk and AML money laundering risk. And they have really shifted the perception of charities as being particularly vulnerable, as it was phrased, to these terrorism financing. So there has been progress made, and I think the third point I make is that with progress, there's also a responsibility on the sector, because banks are all about risk and calculations of risk. So they want to know whether we have identified the risks that we're exposed to, and whether we've got those policies, procedures, governance structures in place to manage the risks. That said, of course, we know a lot of banks don't go to the effort of making nuanced decisions about risk, but one or two have. Barclays have introduced an enhanced due diligence process, which is a much more nuanced process of analysing and working through the risk with clients. I think there's also incumbent on us to inform ourselves of what recourses there are for when we're experiencing problems and of these changes that have been introduced. We would like to communicate more on that as a question of capacity, really, so that charities are aware of what is taking place. Lastly, Jahangir mentioned Nigel Farage. Sometimes opportunities come in strange forms. But it does seem to have sparked a debate, I suppose, and more opportunities. I think there's more pressure on banks now to take I suppose, a more nuanced approach to risk. I noticed at the end of July, there's a new requirement introduced by the Financial Conduct Authority for a consumer duty, which that requirement means that they have to put customer needs first and deliver good outcomes for those clients. And there's a checklist of things that they have to go through. But also the Financial Conduct Authority has openly said that this raises the question of whether there should be a right to a bank account. As you said, it's not actually a right. Only in 2 or 3 countries, France being one of them, is it a right to a bank account. But I think it's a valid question what that account would be. But it also says the second question is whether this should extend to businesses and other groups. So I think there are openings and opportunities, and the FCA has promised further consultation, and I think we should engage with that. And because of the experiences of the Muslim charities sector, I think it's really important that any solutions are informed by your experiences and that you both engage and are engaged with. Thanks, Jahangir.
Very topical issue, as you mentioned, and very much in the limelight at the moment. I'm going to pass on to Brother Tufail Hussain now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I hope you're all well. Some time ago, I joined an organization that was going through an extremely turbulent time. There was a culture of fear within the organization, which led to siloed working. You had heads of departments that were telling briefing their staff to not engage other departments. It was a very toxic work environment, and that led to years of stagnated growth. I mean, that's unheard of in the Muslim charity sector, where Muslim charities are raising significant funds year on year, thanks to the generosity of our community. Sometime later, a new leadership team took over, and they prioritized above all establishing the ideal working culture within that organization. Within a couple of years, there was a transformative change. The environment became a lot more positive. The SMT were unified. They had a sense of purpose. That started to cascade down throughout the organization, and then resulted in the organization going from stagnated growth to within 3 years more than doubling its income. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. We invest so much into our strategy, into creating these elaborate plans to raise funds, but we don't consider enough the importance of culture. Muslim charities have always prided themselves on being organizations that strive to give as much of our funds raised to our rights holders. Some even try to achieve 100%. This is, of course, a noble endeavor. However, it does lead to a number of consequences, one of them being poor governance. The other is a lack of investment into your most important resources, your team. And for any team to flourish, you need the ideal culture. And Shaheen, she's an academic, she describes culture as being the soul of an organization. And if you can establish the ideal culture, you will improve your efficiency, your productivity, and ultimately, and of course morale, and ultimately, you'll allow your organization to achieve its mission. That's what it's all about. And the opposite, of course, ultimately leads to poor efficiency and high turnover of staff, which is a huge cost to an organization and one that is often not considered. So how do we establish an ideal culture? To be honest, I could use this whole day to talk about it. It's a very nuanced topic, and it depends a lot on the actual situation of the organization. But I'll give you my top 3 fundamentals for an ideal, that will help to establish an ideal culture. And of course, it's not one fit for all, right? Number 1 is the purpose, the why. Many of our organizations were started by passionate individuals that were driven by the mission. Many of our staff, many of our organizations have these working environments where it's extremely busy, often under-resourced. And you can very quickly lose sight of your purpose and your why. So it's important to institutionalize your purpose and your why. You can do this in a number of ways. Of course, it's important to develop your vision, mission, and value statements, and they've got to be done in the right way. They've got to make sense. They can't just be posters on a wall. They've got to be brought to life. They've got to be part of the conversation within the organization. And they've got to be cascaded throughout the organization. Every employee ultimately must understand the role that they are playing to deliver on your mission. They must understand their purpose. Secondly, and to be honest, I think this is probably number one, but I made it number two anyway. Leadership. All of you here, you're all leaders of your organizations, or you play some form of leadership role. I'm an old guy, right? And I've been around for a long time, and I've been blessed to have worked in many diverse organizations in different sectors. But one of the consistent factors in organizations where there was an ideal culture was the right leader. So they set the tone. Leaders ultimately set the tone of your culture. Now, there is no ideal style of leadership. Again, it depends on the situation. And any wise leader will adapt their leadership style to their situation. But fundamentally for me, the ideal leader is someone who, when they take that leadership role, it's no longer about them. It's all about the team. Their main objective is to ensure that that team succeeds and that they are empowered. I often use an analogy to describe ideal leadership. It's a person with a snowplow. You know what a snowplow is, right? And with an umbrella. So the snowplow is to clear their way of any obstructions, to give them direction. And the umbrella is to protect them from the politics and the flack that comes inevitably from above. Sorry guys, just lost my space. And it's important that we get the right leader. We must ensure that when we recruit a leader, we go through an open and fair and transparent process. And we need to invest in our leaders. We need to help them develop. Pay for them to get onto courses. Provide them with executive coaches. And of course, try and get them mentors. I mean, we've got a couple here, mashallah, that could be ideal. Would you like to be my mentor, by the way?
Sure.
Thank you. It's easy. You can't say no to me up here, can you? So that's it. We're done. I'm going to sign a contract with you afterwards. And regular 360s, because it's important that you learn from your peers about, because we often have blind spots when we're working or as leaders. So regular 360s are important. And my last point is also to do with that. It's to listen to your staff. Your staff are important, the most important resource that you have. And so listen to your staff, conduct anonymized surveys periodically to get a sense check of the culture. And through that survey, you will understand the challenges. Then it's important though, then to create a staff survey action plan to ensure that you address those challenges. You do not want it to be a tick box exercise. Create the right culture. People will feel valued. They will be motivated, and they will run through walls to help you deliver your mission, inshallah.
Thank you, Brother Tufail. Very valuable lessons there. Thank you. And our final speaker is Brother Moazzam.
Assalamu alaikum. It's very good to be here with you. I'm Moazzam Malik. I'm the chair of the MCF. I was asked to speak about opportunities. The title of our session is Challenges and Opportunities. But just before I did that, I was hoping to address Sarah, who can probably still hear me because she's standing outside with Fadi on her way out, to say that this issue around debanking and de-risking is a big issue for the Muslim charities sector. It's an issue actually for all charities, many charities. Teresa outlined some important steps that we can take to try and address that. But actually, this does need political leadership. And I think we should be coming out of today's conference looking to political leaders to help us navigate this issue. It's really at the very top of the priority list. So I hope Sarah heard that on her way out, and if she didn't, we will follow up to make sure that she has that message unequivocally coming out of today's discussions. Right. I'm going to be relatively brief because so far this morning you've all heard a lot from people sitting on this stage, and actually I think it's really important to hear from you and to engage with the issues that are topmost in your mind. But I'm going to say just a few words about opportunities. The Muslim charities sector is growing. It's growing rapidly as the size of our community grows and as that community gets wealthier. It has the potential to do a lot of good, both in the UK, you heard Fadi talk about this, but also internationally, and Islamic Relief and many others are actively involved in those international efforts. But it has the potential to go beyond just doing good. It has the potential to help us find our place in this country. The Muslim community in the UK is still a relatively recent community in terms of size and scale, though of course the presence of Muslims in Britain goes back centuries, in fact. But nevertheless, these last few years have been years of challenge, there have been years of discrimination, of Islamophobia, and we see that playing out across our politics and societal dynamics day in, day out, week in, week out. And I firmly believe that Muslim charities and the ethos to give, the concept of amana that we bring to how charity work is conducted can help us to find our place in this country and indeed to embed ourselves firmly as a community that should celebrate our place and indeed be celebrated by the mainstream. And so as we find our place in Britain and as we look for those opportunities to do good, but also to be celebrated, to be part of wider society, to contribute, I think there are perhaps 4 or 5 things that can help us on that journey. And many of them have already come up, so I'll be very brief. The first is the need to professionalize. Many of the charities in this room, and indeed many of the charities in the sector, are very young. These are organizations that are 10 or 20 years old at best. And many of them have been founded by individuals. They're very individual focused. So we need to professionalize, and you heard aspects of that. We need to improve our governance. We need to adhere to regulatory concerns, but actually it goes beyond regulatory concerns. We need to identify good practice, embed good practice in how we do our work. Secondly, many charities are very focused on the short term. If they're working internationally, how do we hand out blankets? How do we deliver food? If they're operating domestically, often similar sorts of concerns. But actually to create lasting impact, we've got to look beyond the short term and think about prevention and how do we create long-term impact. Development in the international sphere, but actually even at home in the work that we do in the UK, moving beyond the soup kitchen to engaging with issues around advocacy, rights, and the process of political change. In achieving these objectives, I think it's absolutely critical that we recognize the diversity of our community and the diversity of our sector. And again, you've heard aspects of this earlier, and I'm sure it'll be a theme through the day. We need to recognize the place of women in our community organizations, in our charities. We need to empower young people to play a role. We need to give them voice. We need to give them voice so that their aspiration for change can find an outlet in charitable good work and create real impact. In taking this journey forward, I think it's absolutely critical that we collaborate. None of us can fix the challenges that we face, whether we're working in the UK or internationally, alone. We must collaborate within the sector, find our place in the sector, treasure partnerships, know what you can do, know what others can do, look for collaboration opportunities. But collaborate not just within our sector, but collaborate across the mainstream. Because many of the problems that we feel in our day-to-day lives may feel unique to us, and we may feel them especially strongly because of issues around Islamophobia and so on, but actually many of these problems are shared by others too, including the banking issues and the de-risking issues. So make common cause with mainstream organizations. Reach out beyond the sector, reach out from your comfort zone. In taking this forward, leadership matters, and you've heard Tufail talk passionately about leadership, and I'm delighted to have signed up a new mentee today. Thank you, Tufail, for springing that on me. But maybe just lastly to say that MCF is here to help. The tagline on our banner is support, connect, represent. None of us are in this alone. And the mission of MCF is to create opportunities for us to come together so that we can support each other, we can learn from each other, we can advocate together, and we can address the challenges that we face so that we can celebrate together both the great work that Muslim charities are doing and our place in Britain, and indeed in Britain's place in the world.
Jazakallah khair. Now we'll move on to the Q&A. So there's opportunity now to hopefully hear from you guys. So I'll just take any questions from the floor. When you do put your hands up, I'll just take it. Let us know your name, organisation you're from, and if your question is particularly for somebody in particular, or if it's just for the whole panel. So any question? We've got a hand up straight away. Yeah. Have we got a mic? Oh, yeah, sorry, it's coming.
How embarrassed.
Just over here at the front. Thank you.
Get those steps in.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll ask this on sliders. I'm just going to ask it verbally, if that's okay. My name is Mustafa Khan. I'm representing Ayaan Social Care Foundation. We're a global organization supporting orphan children and families. More than 100,000 children we're supporting across the world. I think for us as well, I think we resonate with everything you just said, but just in terms of the question, I wanted to ask if you think there is preferential treatment to non-Muslim charities versus Muslim charities in particular, not just the financial institutions, but just generally. And if so, how do you think this elephant can be addressed?
Did you guys catch that question?
Yes.
I'm happy for whoever would like to take it.
Well, in terms of preference, what particular aspect? Are you talking about the Charity Commission?
So let's say how non-Muslim faith organizations, like let's say the Salvation Army, the larger organizations which typically get preferential treatment politically, are more connected in regulatory bodies, just because the regulatory body is not as diverse as it needs to be to represent the British community. It's all aspects, I would say. I'm not going to pin it down just on the finance because that's just one topic, but generally speaking, that's something that is there, and I think we need to address the elephant.
Yeah. Did you want to?
Yeah. I think there are a number of ways of looking at this. Obviously, Muslim charities in the last 20 years have had a particularly tough time in terms of the security environment, but we also operate in the most high-risk areas, and therefore there's bound to be attention to that. So I would say of my clients, I've dealt with many investigations by the Charity Commission, but they investigate others too, but I also have clients that have never seen the Charity Commission. So you have to look at the context. Perhaps I get a wider picture. If somebody in our own community, or say a mosque, people are fighting, squabbling, they are reporting people to the Charity Commission, then the Charity Commission might have to intervene. And that happens a lot. Because of the political environment, we have hostile elements in society who have a specific focus on Muslims and complain, and the media generates stories. So those things will end up with the Charity Commission, and they will be obliged to come and have a look. So you can say yes, but that happens to all charities as well. But it might be a perception. The banking issue, I can tell you that's not just a Muslim issue. That's a very wide issue in society, non-Muslim charities, poor people. So, but yes, it's because we work in high-risk areas, the banks might disproportionately be targeting, and that is not a Charity Commission issue.
Tufail, did you want to add?
Good question. I think that there are a lot of this is rooted, some of it is rooted in Islamophobia. Right? There's no doubt about that. Some of it is down to unconscious bias. But I think we also have to look to ourselves, some self-reflection. I think today is going to be a very important engagement for us as a sector, for some self-reflection, because we know that we could be better. I've worked in a number of organizations, and I tell you, I've seen governance which would shock you. I've seen organizations that are raising, and thankfully not in the organization I've worked in, but organizations that have engaged me when they're in trouble, and they're raising tens of millions of pounds, and they have no governance. The trustees never meet. It's run by one organization, one person. That person basically is, the Amir, whoever said earlier, right? He's the Amir. He does whatever he wants. He or she do whatever they want. So it's also down to us. And lastly, I think Islamic Relief is a very good example of this. We've been able to establish very strong relationships with very important stakeholders, the Charity Commission, our bank, and that also helps us to navigate a lot of challenges. So when we do get those right-wing articles that target us with lies, because of that strong relationship that exists, we're able to mitigate a lot of potential challenges.
Thank you. I had a hand up here, and then was there another hand up, did I see? We've got two there, so I'll take those two, and then we'll take them at the same time, if that's okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me, thank you. So Jazakallah khair to the panel, very interesting comments. So my name is Saleh Islam. I've done lots of things in the charitable sector. I've led 4 organizations in the UK and abroad. I have 2 questions, but I'm going to try and frame the main one, which is more about at home, in the sense of what I found in my experience is that it's very difficult to whistleblow. It's very difficult to get things wrong. If you do, you're literally ousted out. Yeah. I think that's incredibly, incredibly difficult and hard. You're talking about professionalism. People have grown exponentially, financially, but there are huge issues in regards to that. And you talk about female leadership, and I have been a leader. I'm the first woman in Europe to have led a mosque. So I've done lots of things. I don't shout about it, I don't talk about it, but there are huge issues about female support. There's always a club, the Alis and Khans or whatever, but where is the club for us? Where is the support for us? We need to really put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you. Is it okay if I take one more question as well? Is that okay? There was just one question behind us, and we'll take that, so we'll take a group.
Jazakallah, thank you. And my gratitude to all the Mukhtar Kareem from the Lady Fatima Trust. My gratitude to each one of the speakers for setting the tone for this. Just something that was inspired by the final speaker, Moazzam's talk about finding our place in Britain and Britain's place in the world. In terms of a lot of the activity I see within the sector, it's beautiful to see it inspired by religious values. So the zakat, Ramadan, responding to people in distress in times of emergencies. But if we were to sit up and look at issues of the UN SDGs, climate change, the larger elements, not because it disproportionately affects Muslims around the world, but that Muslims have an opportunity to do something about it, so that migration isn't dealt with to see why are immigrants being held out, but see how climate change is influencing the flow of communities around the world. So try and make things a little more proactive and plug in initiatives that are already happening around the world in addressing the inequalities a little better. Again, to try and make it a year-long activity across these things. To borrow from the RSPCA, it's not just for Christmas.
Thank you, Jahangir. So just a reminder, we just had the question there, and the earlier questions were about the difficulty to whistleblow and in general female leadership. So happy to, anybody want to go for the Tufail?
Don't mind going. We need to do better. My sister. Assalamu alaikum. Well, let me just get her attention. Asif, do you mind? I'm talking to the sister. I'm joking. I'm kidding. Sister, yeah, in answer to your question, we need to do better as a sector. If you look at, just look at the room. It says everything, really. Well, thankfully, there's a lot more women here, but when you look at the leadership of charitable organizations, there is a lack of diversity. And so we have to put our hand up and say that we need to do better. We, as Islamic Charities worldwide, if you look at our board of directors, all male. And we understand that we need to do better. We've fixed it at the trustee level. Alhamdulillah, it's a lot more diverse. We fixed it at a UK level. We've got a very diverse senior management team there. But we also understand, first of all, it's acknowledging, and we've acknowledged it internally. And we have an action plan to try and improve that. So that's one thing. I think it's acknowledging it, first of all. And I think it's also understanding, we have to understand the strengths of diversity, of diverse opinions. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that are holding us back is rooted in poor governance. Because it is, a lot of we're a fledgling sector. We're still new. A lot of our organizations have only been around for a couple of years. And so when you have poor governance, you have one person or two people that are running the organization, there isn't this understanding about diversity or thinking about the future, then you're going to put barriers up to things, to issues, very important issues like diversity. So we must do better. And lastly, about safeguarding. Again, this gets down to governance. Like in Islamic Charities worldwide, we have a very robust safeguarding policy and framework. But that's because at the highest level, at the trust board, we have people that understand the importance of things like safeguarding. We have a safeguarding lead within the trust board. And so from that, it's led from the highest level in the organization. And they ensure, and they hold us to account to ensure that we have that safeguarding policy in place. We have a very robust whistleblowing policy in place as well. But again, for me, it all comes back to governance. And until we mature as organizations and implement the ideal governance model, we're always going to be struggling as a sector.
Jahangir, we had one.
Sister, I have to disagree with you. I can tell you there's a hell of a lot of people complaining to the Charity Commission. And I sometimes see those letters. I have to deal with it for charities. So people do complain, and that sometimes causes an issue. We have to get much better at the things that Tufail has said: governance, human resource management. But there is something fundamental that's lacking, which goes deep down to our Islamic values and ethical values. I've dealt with disputes where I get so annoyed at the lying, the cheating of both parties, and I've said this in some cases to mosques, that the only thing Islamic about the way you're running this organization is the recitation of the Quran at the beginning of the meeting. Everything else is un-Islamic. So we have to root our way of working in our values, and one of the concepts that we have, my hero is Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, is a great leader, but for me, coming from a management administration background, he was one of our greatest administrators. And he learnt from the Persians and the Romans. He wasn't one of those who didn't take things from elsewhere. And we have to adopt the transparency that he adopted, but the Quranic concept of shura. We don't do shura. A lot of the reasons why we have these issues, we don't do shura with our staff, we don't do shura with our congregations, we don't tell them what we're doing. If people ask questions, we don't have a critical culture. If people ask questions, we feel threatened. And of course, then there are real, genuine issues where people want to take over another group or faction wants to take over a charity. So there's a lot of issues. It's not straightforward, but I can assure you a lot of people are complaining to different places.
Moazzam, did you want to finish off?
Did you want to come on?
Mine was a small point because it's not de-risking actually. It's about the tension between professionalism and passion really, and I can see it in my own organisation. They're seen as they're at odds with another. The more you professionalise, it's seen as bureaucratisation, and you lose the passion, which is the driving, the cause and the mission. But I think that what you were saying about leadership, it really is crucial in that, because you can straddle that divide, as it were, through good leadership by demonstrating the values and showing the kind of moral conviction, but showing that you can do that in a professional way. And people perform their best when those systems and processes are clear. They know their role, they know their contribution to the mission.
Thank you.
And if I might comment just very briefly, first of all, to welcome Mukhtar's comment on the need to address the global challenges, actually, that we face as a human race, whether it's issues of conflict or indeed climate change. These are issues that affect Muslims, but also affect us all around the world as we try and figure out how this common planet of ours remains a home to the diverse people that have Allah's blessing to live on it. But I wanted to also address the issue around women, because I think it is a critical issue, and I think today is a critical opportunity. So where, there was a message for Sarah around debanking and de-risking and helping us, I think this should be a theme for us today around how we address the issue of gender diversity in the Muslim charity sector. Coming into today's convention, Fadi and I talked about the risk of having manels all through the day today and how we avoided that. I'm really pleased that we've got a session this afternoon that is focused on recognizing and celebrating and learning from women. And I think as MCF, we've got a particular responsibility to invest in women in the sector and indeed work with our members to help create opportunities for women to take leadership positions. It's not a nice to have. Diversity is never a nice to have. Diversity is mission critical. Unless we reflect the communities in which we work, we cannot succeed. So this isn't about being nice and ticking boxes and, telling the Charities Commission. This is critical to who we are and what we want to do and what we can achieve and the impact that we want to make. So if you've got ideas around this, men or women, then please, talk to me, talk to Fadi, talk to others, engage with the session that we've got this afternoon, and let's see how we can address this.